I've really been thinking a lot about, and I know you've talked about it too, about how sometimes people don't cross over when they first die. And sometimes it can be years or even centuries that people don't cross over, meaning that they die and they just don't go through. A lot of times we'll see a tunnel of light where they go through it to go over to the other side to their loved ones. And that sometimes they don't do that, and they just hang around like you call a lost soul.
How do you usually know if someone didn't cross over?
Well, everybody's different. We were talking about that too. Is for me, if they haven't crossed over, they look really crisp and clear, meaning I can see them pretty clearly for the most part. And also they have like heavy energy. They might feel depressed, or they might feel anxious, or sometimes they feel light filled and they just feel like they want to be around their loved ones. They don't want to leave them, so they feel, not that they're too heavy, but they're just not wanting to move on from their loved ones. So it depends on what happened.
I think for me, how I get the knowing or the feeling is that I always tend to get the heavier feeling if they haven't crossed over, because then that's the signal for me. They haven't crossed over, but if they have crossed over, then it feels lighter. They also look more light filled to me. How do you know for you if they've crossed over?
Well, they look more light filled, but also I can't see them as clearly. Like if it's been, let's say they just crossed over, I see them light filled. I can still see quite a few details, but the longer they're gone, if they've been gone, crossed over more than a year, it becomes harder and harder to see them, to the point where sometimes I can't really tell what the person looks like. It's just really tough. And they might try to show themselves, but it's hard to see hair color, because a lot of times that can give people a clue as to whether it's them or not, or it's hard to see real clear facial features and things like that. So it's like, oh, this person's been gone a while if I can't see it. It's almost like they go above our lower realm vibration here, and they have to dumb down their energy to be seen here.
I just remembered something for me when I'm tuning in and someone has passed away. For me to get that knowing, a lot of times they'll give me a snapshot of what they used to look like, or sometimes even an actual photo, like a real life photo, and then I'll describe that photo to the client. A lot of times the client, how did you know they were wearing that, or that's what they looked like? And a lot of times that's how they will show me that's what they looked like, but that's not what they look like once they pass away and cross over.
Yeah, I have seen that too sometimes, where they'll show a photo if they want to show a photo of, let's say, themselves with the person that they're with. But sometimes they don't. It just varies. So it's really, because I have a lot of people that will come in, not necessarily to get in touch with loved ones, but they'll be there, and I'll just describe what they look like. And every once in a while, if they're trying to get in touch with somebody, they'll say, oh, I really miss my grandmother, and then somebody will show up. It could be the great-grandmother, so sometimes describing who it is best you can will help you determine whether it's actually that person or somebody connected to that person. So sometimes somebody else wants to come in instead. It happens every once in a while. Not usually, but sometimes. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Where even if the person doesn't mention somebody, that soul just wants to come in.
Or they might say, oh, I really miss my grandmother, but the great-grandmother shows up.
Oh, like somebody else just comes in completely, even if they mentioned.
Like, oh, I want to talk about my daughter. Which is the one that you're talking about. Like, I really miss, I miss raising my daughter. I died young. It could be something like that. Yeah.
I haven't had that happen too much for me, but you see way more people than I do. So.
Well, I'm a lot older than you. That's why.
So maybe one day that'll happen with me, but that's why I like having these conversations with you, because me and you have some similar experiences and some different and healthy things. So.
Definitely. We were talking about, so let's say they haven't crossed over. For me, it would be, I can see them really clearly. It's easy. They might have a heavier energy for you. They just have a heavier energy. You can see kind of features, but nothing clear. You might get a snapshot.
Yep.
Well, if they haven't crossed, it's not really good for them or the people around them, because they leave the heaviness for everyone to feel. So let's say the loved ones of that person might feel depressed. If they're depressed, they died and they were depressed, they haven't crossed over, that depression lingers. And so then we want to move them on so that they feel lighter and better.
So that's one other way of knowing or confirming if a loved one hasn't crossed over, is if someone continues to feel heavier or more depressed, sad, whatever that lost soul is feeling, typically is how the person will be feeling, and it affects you. So
Yeah, and there's different things that I've noticed too, and you may have noticed this too. For example, if somebody committed suicide, rarely do they cross over, and it's not because they deserve not to cross over. A lot of times, suicide can be very spontaneous, meaning it's not planned out in some cases, or even if it is planned out, once they die and they're out of the depressed body, they feel bad that they hurt their loved ones. They might feel bad that their mom or dad is suffering so much, or their spouse or whoever. And so then they hang around because they want to comfort the person, or they don't know what, they don't feel it, they want to make it right somehow. But of course you can't make it right when you're on the other side. So then a lot of times if somebody says such and such committed suicide, I'll automatically figure they probably haven't crossed. In rare cases they have, but I don't know if you've noticed anything with that.
I've had to work with 2 people who I knew who committed suicide, and neither one of them had crossed over right away. And it was very similar with both of them. They had a lot of heaviness, regret, sadness. They felt so bad. It actually took quite a while to cross them over. It wasn't right away. Whereas maybe sometimes if it's a natural death, the soul will cross over a lot faster, almost within a few minutes of us working on it. But I felt like the ones who passed away by suicide, they took maybe a week.
It can take a while. Yeah, they can. Yeah, when you say that, it made me think about, there was one person that, one of my relatives, who she was on her deathbed, and she said her ex-husband, who wasn't nice to her, kept trying to cross her over. And she was super upset about that, and I thought, wow, I didn't know that was even allowed. But she talked about it 3 different times, and she says, I don't want to die if I have to meet up with him. I don't want him to be the one to cross me over. And I'm like, oh my gosh. You don't have to have him cross you over. Ask for somebody else. So I said, but probably, my sense was that he had already crossed over and they were super close souls. But, I figure that, so I try to let people know that if they've died and somebody, they don't want to have them cross over, I told her, ask for she wanted her cousin to cross her over because she was close to her cousin. I said, well, ask for her. Well, when she died, she didn't cross, and it took a really long time to cross her over, and I was sure she crossed. It felt a lot better. And then all of a sudden another relative, because I have a lot of people that are intuitive in the family, and one of the younger, my cousin's daughter said, oh, such and such hasn't crossed, she was in the house. And I'm like, what do you mean she hasn't crossed? So every once in a while you can be fooled. It's almost like they want to, I mean, that's only happened to me one time, actually.
That's really interesting about her being on the deathbed and then her seeing her husband.
Ex-husband.
Oh, ex-husband.
That's it, got easier.
Ex-husband trying to bring her to the other side. And then if she's got the bad memories of him, she's not going to want to see him.
Yeah, for sure not.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, I was shocked that was even allowed. But it must have been something that I just didn't understand about it, or she didn't, but I hope she's gone. We went through another phase of crossing her. It felt to me like she had crossed actually but this, the younger cousin felt like she hadn't. So I thought, well,
was that residue?
It could be a residue because there is residue. So a lot of times they don't fully cross over and you have to do that. But even let's say I feel like that person's crossed all the residue, you can lose pieces of yourself due to traumas and difficulties that don't go on with the core self. But let's say I felt like everything had crossed over, but you're like, oh, I'm not so sure. I would go with the, I'm not so sure, and try again. I always do the conservative because sometimes it could be one person doesn't think it's happened. I always go with the more conservative to make just an insurance policy. Sure. Yeah, even if I feel like certain that it's happened, I would go with the other person just because what's it going to hurt to try again, right?
Yeah.
It's only going to make it more possible that it's completely done. Or maybe it hasn't been done. Maybe it's not done for that person. There's some reason why you need to check on.
Could they be hanging on to parts of that person who passed away?
For sure they could.
That's what they're hanging on to, and that maybe that's some of that residue or
because this would have been the person that felt like she hadn't crossed. It would have been her great aunt, which I don't know how close she was, but I know her dad was very close to her, so it could be something like that. But she felt like she was wandering around their house.
Oh wow.
Yeah, which would be different than being a part of her. But on the other hand, sometimes people will cross over and they will still come back, and even though they've crossed, they can still come back. So that's what I felt was likely the case. But usually once they've moved on, well, they can do things.
Yeah.
They can move things. They can do things. Have you seen that where they'll actually move things to get people's attention?
If you're not paying attention, they're gonna get your attention.
Yes. Give me an example of what you've seen, and I'll give you a couple examples.
Well, this happened with my dad. When he passed away in 2011, maybe about a year later was after I was tapping into the spiritual side of things and spiritual side of life. We had an altar at my family's house, and I saw smoke. He used to smoke coming from his altar. And he was the only one that smoked in my family, but it was letting me know that he was still with us, but on the other side, because there was this huge disconnect after he passed away. And after that, I really started tuning in more. And everybody can do this. So if someone passed away, you can tune in more to the loved one who passed away. And so I actually have a deeper connection with my dad now that he's crossed over than I did when he was living. So that was one example.
That's a good one. I know I was working with a woman whose brother died, and then he came back, and there was a watch that she had of his that didn't work for years and years, and all of a sudden it started working. He came in and he turned it, he came in when she came in for a session and showed that he had turned it on.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I've had things where all of a sudden a fire alarm will go off when they're there trying to really get your attention. That's happened a couple times to me where it went off at 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning.
I remember that.
Or maybe it was the other way around, 1, 2, and 3. But it's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
I remember get my attention, will ya? We're in the middle of the night. So, a lot of times, in this case, it felt more like, it didn't feel like a lost soul as much as maybe a guide. Like a higher vibrational being that was giving me a message about something. You need to pay attention to something. You need to think differently about something that's connected to somebody in your family or something like that.
A lot of times a higher guide, or people will think of them as angels. Some people call their guides angels, but they will do these things to try to get your attention if you're not paying attention to something important in your life. And they'll do stuff like that. Turn on your fire alarm.
Yeah, that was one. And then another time, one more thing was my aunt had died, and my cousin and I, we were both her niece. We were sitting at my old place that I lived in, and all of a sudden both of us noticed that she came in. And she even mentioned it, oh, Marlene's in the room. And so then all of a sudden, the fireplace goes on. The gas fireplace on its own.
Here at your house?
No, it was a different house that had a gas fireplace. And we're like, wow. And I could see her over there. And we looked at the remote that you turn it off and on with. It was turned off. And so I had to turn it on and then back off again. And then she turned it, and then she did some other things too. She would turn a light on or off, that kind of thing. And so some of those souls that have moved on, they can actually fix things or make things happen like that. And then the man with the watch. Other people, they just don't seem to be able to once they cross over. I don't know what the difference is, but some people can and some people can't.
Do you think it could be related to what their task is once they cross over? Maybe some people are assigned certain things that they can do on the other side, and then others are allowed to come back and do these things, whereas some others who have crossed over, it's like, nope, you've got to move on. You need to go do something else, different assignment.
Well, they can actually come in, but and they'll say, we're trying to give you a sign, but they can't seem to make physical things work.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Like they might feel them, I can feel them there. I can feel the presence of my dad or my loved one, but they can't go and turn the light or the gas fireplace on. That would be the difference. So, it is interesting. And I was actually talking to somebody this morning, and he was talking about how him and his wife went into a haunted hotel to stay. And
they knew it was haunted. It was intentional.
It was. Okay. And then they talked about how a little kid that died young, and it was very playful, and he was playing. They could hear the child play, hear the footprints, and it felt very happy. And I said to him, did you think that maybe that person should have been crossed over? And he looked kind of surprised. He goes, no, I really didn't think about that. And I said, well, that's what we're trying to do, is to let people know that if somebody seems to be there, see, have they crossed over? If they haven't, ask that their loved ones come to help them, that a tunnel of light is there to help them cross over too. And I always defaulted to the higher self because we have a spirit that never dies that guides us, which I think is bigger than just the individual life. And ask that bigger part of us, the higher self, that's the umbrella for all the lifetimes we've been in, past, present, future, decides where we go next. Because even though there may be what we think of as a traditional heaven, but there could easily be, which it seems to me many places that people may go to, and I don't want to default it to the higher self because I don't want to convince them to go somewhere that maybe isn't where they should be. That's even possible, but you never know. I didn't think people would be allowed to have an ex-husband show up. So.
I know. I didn't know that at all. That was the first time you told me that story.
I was so surprised. Oh my gosh.
Well, you always want to default to the higher self. They know better than any of us will know. So
for sure.
That's just the insurance.
Well, when you were talking about your dad, I noticed he started coming in. I don't know if you noticed. So should we tune in and see if he has a message for you?
Yeah, let's do that.
He's hard to see because he's been gone a while.
Yes, it's been 13 years now.
I just could see a vague image. So that would have been hard if I didn't know you and didn't know that, because he popped in right when you talked about your dad, and I just got this knowing he was your dad, and I saw the faint outline, but I couldn't really tell you what he looks like based on this. So you can see if you can tell.
I can barely see him anymore.
Yeah, he's moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And then messages can be harder too once they've moved on for a while, but let's see if we can get any sense of what he wants to say.
Well, I just feel a lot in my heart for sure.
Aww.
So he's probably sending a lot of love. That's one of their ways of communicating. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I get the image of your mom. What he's thinking about her too.
Oh.
So that I can see clearer than him. The image of your mom, that he wants her to be happier. He feels like she's working too hard.
Yeah, she does. And Ashley, her birthday's coming up.
Oh.
I see him showing he's giving her some gifts. I'll make sure to send her gifts, but that's what I'm seeing.
Let's see, anything else that you want to tell your daughter, Lynn? Well, almost he's glad that we've connected because that way he's noticed that you are really moving into your gifts and talents in a bigger way, and he's showing you really light-filled and continuing on, and also he, like these crystals. Oh, he's just saying that they just make him happy. Oh, the crystals make him happy.
They make me happy too. They make all of us happy.
So that's good. And a lot of times I like holding them too because they feel good.
So good.
Yeah, this one really feels good.
That's epidote in quartz, and so is this one. But this one's got more quartz. That one's got more epidote in it.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on what you need day by day, but this one I really, when you showed me these two, I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold on to this one.
I brought that one just for you.
Oh, so you knew. Thank you.
I did. You're welcome. And with my dad saying he's glad that we met, I really think that it was just meant to be.
Oh, for sure.
There was no way that we were never going to meet, so.
Yeah.
Our souls are so close, so it's just meant to be.
Yeah, I always call you daughter Lynn and you mama.
Yep, and you are my mama, so.
Yes. We're definitely, sometimes your family is soul family. It can be, family doesn't have to be biological.
Nope. I've definitely made a family for myself that's not biological, and
me too.
I'm so grateful.
So, well, anything else you want to say? Any final message from your dad? He's kind of surrounded. I just feel a lot of positive energy exuding from him.
Yeah, that's what I really felt in my heart initially.
So he's moved on to the higher planes, the higher vibrations. So he's not going to be giving us any super big detail. But if he had just died, then we'd get a lot more information because he'd be more connected here. So anyway, well, this has been fun to talk about this and about the other side. Anything else you want to share about it, Chloe, on this?
No, I mean, I thought it was super interesting that you shared about, was it your aunt?
Actually, it was my cousin.
Your cousin?
But it was like my mother's first cousin.
So your mother's first cousin's ex-husband coming back.
Yeah.
That part I'm still baffled about.
Me too.
So, yeah. I mean, I've never heard of that before either. But I just wanted to share with you what it's like when people pass away and crossing over, and what it's like on the other side, or what it's like for us when we see them.
Hopefully this helps, and then think about how you notice people. If you're thinking about a loved one that's on the other side, how do you feel when they come into you? Does their energy feel light to you? Does it feel heavier? Does it feel neutral. And then if it feels like, geez, did they cross, or it's hard to tell, then you can always just try to guide them. Ask that tunnel of light comes in with their loved ones, and spirit guides ask their higher self to decide where they go for their next highest level destination. And you can just give them messages of encouragement to move on out of this place that they don't need to be in anymore. So, well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much.